Okay, welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. Now, if you've been following the channel for a little while, you may have spotted a couple of videos I did a little while ago looking at some of the contents of the garage here. Not the cars, but just some of the random clutter that's hanging up from the ceiling, on walls, on shelves, and that kind of thing. Things that, on the face of it, have no real value at all, but to me they have a bit of a story, a bit of a backstory, and for that reason alone they are here and they are kept and preserved here at OCCHQ. But yeah, on the face of it, most of this stuff should have been ended up in a skip many years ago. So I'm just going to take you through just a handful of extra items, things that haven't yet featured on the channel but may have appeared in the background of other videos, and just explain a little bit about why they are still here. And to begin with, I'm going to go back to 2009 and talk a little bit about an old Austin 7 Special that I found many moons ago down in Kent. And as a reminder of that very exciting find, I have this item which is on the floor just down here. Just bear with me 2 ticks. Right, this is the front part, the honeycomb from the radiator of an Austin 7 Swallow. Now, whether it was a tourer or a saloon, I'm not quite sure, but if you can see there, it still has the Austin badge on it. I think originally it would have had a Swallow script on there. Yeah, it's got the old honeycomb. It's obviously pretty battered, no longer of any use, but maybe it could be used again, possibly on a special or something like that, perhaps in front of the real radiator, if you like. And if you look at it sideways on, you can see there is a bit of a curve on it, and that tells me that this came off an Austin 7 Swallow from about 1930. I think there were 2 main grille design or radiator designs on the swallow-bodied Austin 7s, and I think this is a sort of 29 or 30 era of cars. I think from 1931 they did change the style of it slightly, and it had like a centre strip down the middle. But yeah, this is a reminder of a very exciting trip. Well, probably 5 trips in total, I think it was, down to near Gravesend in Kent in 2009 to disinter, to rescue a very interesting Austin 7 Special. Now, I should probably do a separate video about it sometime. Let me know in the comments if I should do. But in a nutshell, I got to hear of a house that was being cleared, and it had belonged to a gentleman. It's quite spiky, that. Let me just put that down. But yeah, this Austin 7 had belonged to a gentleman who was a bit of a leading light, apparently, in the world of Austin 7 special building in the 1950s and the 1960s. And tucked away in this building was a little Austin 7 Special that he had built way back in the 1950s. So with the address to hand, we headed down there. The first rundown was just an exploratory look, just to check this thing out and just see exactly what it was, because I don't think I'd even seen a photo of it. I'd been told it was a garage find Austin 7 Ulster, and that is what the family had always referred to it as. But as it was, it turned out this was actually a special which used some Austin 7 Ulster, or the EA Sports as it was officially known, parts, but it wasn't a complete original Ulster. But it was a great little car. We had the address, we headed down, and we went through. It was just off a main road, but you never would have known this house was there. You went through this sort of slightly overgrown driveway entrance and up this sort of winding drive, quite overgrown, and then suddenly we just sort of came out into a bit of a clearing, and there was this huge Victorian house, big detached house, and there was lots of sort of outbuildings attached, sort of had been joined to the house over the years, corrugated tin buildings, wooden sheds, all that kind of thing. It was all a little bit tumbled down, a little bit Heath Robinson almost, but we could tell we'd found the correct place. There were Bedford CA vans dotted around in the undergrowth gathering dust, and we knew we'd probably found the right place. There were other cars there as well, but it was the Austin 7 Special I went down to go and have a look at. We had to break into this building with the family there. We had to sort of break into this building by torchlight, climb through these little sort of rooms in these buildings that had sort of been haphazardly added around the house, breaking down doors as we went to sort of get through, because some of them had been nailed up. And we ended up in this tiny little room, not much bigger than the car itself, and it's pitch black, and there was this Austin 7 Special, which was a great thing to find. I was really excited to find this thing. and it had been sat there since 1959, and this was in 2009, so it had been sat there for 50 years, and I can't believe at the time of recording this that was 16 years ago. I can't believe it was that long ago. But yeah, and the long story short is I managed to buy this car. The family were in the process of clearing the estate, and they had everything valued, and I basically had to pay the value that had been assigned to this little car by the probate people, I think it was. So there was no negotiation, it was either pay it or don't bother, so I paid it. And then sort of plans were set in motion to go and actually retrieve this thing. I think I actually went down again just simply to clear access to get to this little car. There was no point going with a trailer because there was just no way of getting the car out in one day. So yes, I think my third trip down there was with the trailer itself, and I dragged this little car back home, and then there were 2 subsequent trips just to arrange to collect quite a mountain of spare parts. There was a spare chassis leaning against up the wall, which it turned out was actually off a coach built, probably like a one-off Austin 7, because it still had property of the Austin Motor Company, a little plaque just on the chassis riveted to the chassis itself, which is a sign that you're looking at a chassis that was provided to an outside coach builder to specially body one particular Austin 7. And ooh, there's a wasp. But yes, that was just one of many, many gems that were found, and included amongst them was this, just chucked on the floor. No real value. I mean, it's no use to anyone, to be honest. You couldn't use that on the car again in terms of a radiator, but as a thing to hang up on the wall, especially as a memento of that fascinating expedition and the adventure of finding and retrieving this incredible little Austin 7 all those years ago. That is why this is still here. On the face of it, you might keep the badge and chuck this away because, like I said, there's no real use, there's no value to that at all. But the value to me is the story that lies behind it, and that is why this is hanging up in the garage here at OCCHQ. Right, let's go and get item number 2 in this trawl around the junk here in the garage behind me. Rightio, now items 2 and 3 in this look back in the rogues gallery of surplus random clutter here in the garage. Both actually relate to the exhaust systems on what are now classic or vintage cars. One is designed to improve the efficiency of an exhaust system, and another not so much, in fact probably quite the opposite, to be honest, and that is the item. I'll have a look now. This intriguing little item, hope you can see that. Now, you may well recognise this or you may not, but this is an exhaust whistle. And this is the kind of thing that you would have fitted into the end of the tailpipe on your car's exhaust if you wanted it to make a whistling sound. Now, these are still available new, to be honest. I think a lot of modern tuner fans, people who tune up modern cars, they do buy these sometimes just for the added giggles, if you like. But this is, I think it's made, I hope you can see that, it's not great, but I think this is made out of bronze, possibly brass, but I think it's probably bronze. There's no maker's name on it, but this is an original period exhaust whistle, and this literally would have been screwed to the end of the tailpipe with this bit, the wide bit there, pointing into the exhaust so that the exhaust gases go that way. And then here you have this bit here, you have the whistle. Hope you can just about see that. If I just stand to one side, maybe you can probably just see that there. But that is what this is. Where this came from, to be honest, I have no idea where I found this, and I've yet to actually give it a try. But I recognised it when I saw it, and I thought, what a great fun little thing that is. It can't have done much for the flow of the exhaust gases, because I mean, if you have that shoved up the exhaust pipe, it can't really help. And reading around a little bit, these exhaust whistles were quite popular. You could get some really quite convoluted examples. I think mainly it's an American car thing, certainly in the 1920s, the vintage car era, and you could get some fantastic setups that actually plumb in to the forward end of the exhaust where the downpipe joins the exhaust manifold. You could split them there, take the exhaust off and fit this little contraption in here with various pipes along here, and you could operate it from the dashboard as you were driving along. You could actually actuate this thing, and it sounds like a whistle, like a steam whistle on the steam locomotive. They sound fantastic. Now, I don't think that's what this would do. This would probably just give literally a whistle, But some of the other alternatives, which actually operate at the other end of the exhaust pipe under the bonnet, they are fantastic. I'd certainly recommend have a look. There's one or two videos around here on YouTube of people demonstrating some of the more expensive, the more convoluted exhaust whistles on their cars. I think there's a gentleman with a Ford Model A, and he's got a setup under his bonnet. It looks really, really impressive to us. And the sound, like I say, it's just like a steam loco, and yeah, it's really, really cool. Now, the other item, which also relates to exhausts, and again is an aftermarket accessory even, is just on the floor here. I did actually feature briefly in a video earlier this year, 2025, asking if anyone on the channel recognised what it is, and judging by the comments below the video, a few of you did, but not too many. And like I say, this again relates to car exhaust systems, and there is the item itself. I've had this hanging up in the garage for many, many years, probably 20 years now. But do you remember what these are? Do you recognise what this is? Because back in the 1950s, as now even, modifying cars, getting more performance out of your car has always been an interest of enthusiastic car owners, whereas nowadays people remap their ECUs and other such things to eke out a little bit more power from their engine. Back in the 1950s and 60s, it was modified cylinder heads, possibly reprofiled cams, different carburetor setups. That was the kind of thing that many people opted to buy, to shell out their hard-earned money on, to improve the performance of their little car. Now, this is just the type of accessory that would have been offered by the likes of Les Leston, the tuning company, Aquaplane perhaps, people like that. Even your local Halford store probably stock these. This is an exhaust extractor, and the idea was that you would put this on the tailpipe of your exhaust. Your exhaust goes on this end here, and this bit sticks out the back of the car, so we're talking right at the back end of the exhaust. And the theory is that this contraption, as you drove along, would help extract the waste, the exhaust gases, from the engine more efficiently, more quickly, and that in turn would eke out a little bit more brake horsepower, a few extra horses from your car's engine. Now, whether they actually did any good or not, I honestly don't know. If you are familiar with tubular exhaust manifolds, or headers as they're called in the USA, you'll know that the length of the pipes are tuned to maximise the sort of the extractor effect of each individual cylinder on the next cylinder that ignites fuel in the flow of things. So if you've got a firing order of 1, 3, 4, 2, number one cylinder, the exhaust gases go out, and the idea is that as they pass down the tubular manifold, that helps draw out the gases from the next cylinder in line, i.e. cylinder number 3, because 1, 3, 4, 2. That first lot of waste gas helps draw the second lot behind it, and this is kind of in a similar theme, the idea being that as you drive along, the air rushes by, the wind rushes by, and it goes through here, and it narrows, just like in a jet engine, and comes out here. And you've even got, there's like a little fixed fan assembly in there almost, if you like, some little blades. Not sure if you can see that, possibly. But the idea is that the wind rushes through here, down here, and passes the end, because this is the exhaust pipe, remember, and this bit finishes about there. So the fresh air comes down here, down the side of the exhaust pipe, and then out of here, and in doing so, shooting out of there, that draws the exhaust gases which are coming down here. And the whole idea was, the faster you go, the more extractor effect you will get from the air rushing in through here, and that would help draw the exhaust gases out, away from the engine, down the pipe and out the back of the car. And that is the theory behind that. Whether it did any good or not, I really don't know, and I probably didn't explain that very well, but hopefully you can see kind of what I'm talking about there. If I just hold that quite closely, you'll be able to see roughly what there is in there. But it's quite a novel thing. It looks like this one's made out of stainless steel. I did briefly have it fitted to, I think on the A40, something like that, but it's never really been a feature on any of the cars that I've run so far. But if I get a suitable car with the right sort of diameter exhaust pipe, i.e. that, I could see me putting that on, because you don't tend to see this kind of accessory on cars at the many shows and the meets that we get to. But yeah, if you remember using one of these, and if you've got any evidence they actually did any good, please pop a note in the comments, let me know, because it's one of those things that I've seen the odd advert for, but they seem to be all but forgotten about now. But anyway, without further ado, I'm just going to nip back over into the garage and see what else I can talk about in this short video about random items of car related clutter. Okay, time for some more classic number plate action as in previous videos. Now, one that I haven't featured yet is this one, GRO536G. Now, I probably will actually do a separate video about this at some point in time, but this was a 1968 Triumph Spitfire Mark III that I had in the early, about 1993, 92, 93 I think I bought it. But what made it different was this one had been fitted with a 2.5 litre engine from one of the big Triumph saloons. Now, like I say, I could do a separate video about that car. If you'd like me to, please pop a note in the comments and let me know. But in summary, this was the second Triumph Spitfire that I spent quite a lot of time and money resurrecting from a non-running car. This is a car we went to look at. It was advertised in one of the free ads newspapers. I think it was Loot, perhaps. And the gist of the advert was it was all up and together. It needed paint and trim. It said it just needs paint and trim, or words to that effect. But as it actually transpired, there was a whole lot more work required. It wasn't a runner. The engine had been installed and all the sort of mechanical mods had been done. But then either someone sort of ran out of steam or money, or maybe a bit of both. I'm not quite sure. Then I think someone else had had it, and they tried to bodge it to get it to work, and they'd obviously given up. I mean, the wiring on it, for example, was a disaster. There was lots of domestic wiring into this thick single pole stuff that you use in household wiring, and when I put a battery on it, you could hear and even see sparking behind the dashboard. It was that poor. The wiring was in such a terrible state. I think I ended up getting hold of, a second-hand loom from somewhere and adapting that to suit. But whoever had done the original engine conversion had actually really thought about it and done a very, very neat job. Just pop that down over here. Now, someone had taken a basic Mark III Spitfire. Now, most of you probably know that the Triumph Spitfire was available with a 4-cylinder engine. It did increase in size over the years, but Triumph never offered a 6-cylinder Spitfire. There was the GT6, and they all had the 2-litre straight-six engine in, but Triumph never offered the 2.5 in either the Spitfire or the GT6. The 2.5 was offered in the TR5 and the TR6, but those cars had fuel injection and were slightly different variations, different level of tune on that engine compared to those that were in the big Triumph saloons, in particular the 2.5S, which is where my engine had been sourced from. So someone had put the 2.5 in the Mark III Spitfire, but that can make it a bit nose heavy, and the handling can always be a bit marginal at the best of times on the Triumph Spitfire. Rear wheels tucking under, that can always be a bit of a problem on the early Spitfires and the Triumph Heralds, Vitesses and that kind of thing. So what they'd done is they'd actually mounted the engine about a foot further back in the chassis, and to do that they had to cut away the bulkhead and remake the bulkhead just to get the weight distribution a little bit better. And that, to be honest, that transformed the handling. This car handled so much better than my standard Spitfire that I had before, KED 453F. They had to shorten the prop shaft down, the drive shaft if you like, to the rear axle, and modify the inner section of the chassis to accommodate the gearbox being about 12 inches or so further back in the chassis. The rear suspension had been completely redone. They'd actually taken the Rotaflex rear suspension arrangement from the Mark II Triumph GT6 and grafted that onto the chassis of the Mark III Spitfire that I had, and as a result you didn't get any of this wheel tuck under, and it transformed the car. The combination of that properly developed rear suspension, which worked really nicely to be honest, that plus the engine being way back further in the chassis because it's a big heavy lump, big heavy cast iron engine. Those two modifications, they transformed the handling. It handled very, very neutrally, and it made it a very, very exciting car to drive. I spent quite a lot of time on it. A friend of mine did a fair bit of welding to it, but eventually I did get it on the road, and it was never fully finished. I remember the choke linkages were never properly, the choke cable, that's it, the choke cable was never properly fully attached, and the linkage was never quite right. So to start it in the morning, you had to pop the bonnet up, pull the chokes down on the SU carbs, fire it up, and then pop them back up, and off you go. But it went like a rocket, this thing. You know, traffic light Grand Prix, they could be a lot of fun. You get people turning up in brand new Golf GTIs, that kind of car, and being a young hooligan at the time, you could easily dispense with quite a few of the hot hatches. It was quite low geared, it didn't have overdrive, but it was quite low geared, and off the line it really did rock it, and it could be a lot of fun. I did have one or two minor dramas with it, with odd wheels coming off, that kind of thing. But if you'd like me to do a video talking about that Spitfire in a little bit more detail, do a video specific to that car, please pop a note in the comments again and just let me know, because obviously there's no point in me doing it if no one wants to watch it. But if you'd be interested in that and a few of the other stories from some of the cars that are long gone, 30 odd years ago, from the fleet at OCC, then yeah, please let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can arrange. But yes, GRO 536G is that old 2.5 Spitfire. Now, where it is now, I'm not quite sure. I did see it advertised a few years ago, and it had changed from blue to sort of looked like it had been rattle can green almost. And whether it's still got the 2.5 in it, I'm not sure. I did have a look on DVLA, and that showed it as having a 4-cylinder engine, either the 13 or the 1500. I'm not quite sure what it was actually registered with. And to be honest, I can't remember if I actually re-registered it at 2.5 or if I just left it as it was with DVLA. It was always insured properly, and I had to get an engineer's report before I could insure it. But back then you didn't worry too much about whether DVLA records exactly matched the car itself. As long as it was registered, and as long as it was insured properly, and at the time you had to MOT them, then everyone was pretty happy. But if that car is still around, I'd be very interested to know where it is now. It's probably one of the few old cars that I've had that I would almost consider buying back again. Ideally, if it's still got the 2.5 in it. But I'm basically putting this one out to you guys watching this video. Is GRO 536G still around, or is it just a case of it's still registered with DVLA, but it was broken up a long time ago? Who knows? But if you know, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's go and find another item to talk about here in the OCC garage. Okay, and the next item to feature here also relates to that 2.5 litre Spitfire, but it isn't actually anything that Triumph made, and it is this, or rather these random bits of scrap metal here. What do these have about them that mean that they are still here today, some 30 or so years after I retrieved them? Well, going back a little way, I had that Mark III Spitfire 2.5, and I'd recently found a steel hardtop for it. And the idea with this much modified car was to make it look as if it could possibly have been a car that maybe Triumph had built as a one-off in the 1960s. And if you've ever seen the Works rally cars, the Austin Healey's, the MGB Roadsters with the factory hardtops on, you'll see they have like a little air vent set into their hardtops just to give a bit of ventilation to the driver and the co-pilot, the co-driver, the navigator, whatever. And those roof vents are sourced from, well, originally they came out on the A30 and the Austin A35 vans, and the early BMC minivans also had them as well. And that's what this is. It's obviously in two pieces. Originally there was a hinge that joined the two of them together. I'm not sure which side it was now. But this would have originally been screwed to the roof of a van, and this came out of an Austin A35 van. Back in the 1990s, before we bought a house and things like that and got bogged down with all those kind of things, we often used to spend weekends going off driving out into the hills looking for interesting things, because back then you could still spot things at the side of the road which kind of looked interesting, or you could peer through people's hedges, look in farm driveways, and often see interesting things as you went about. And we actually stumbled across a little scrapyard. Now I think it was probably New Mills direction, somewhere over there, like the other side of Stockport when you go off up into the hills. And we found this scrapyard and we had a bit of a mooch around, and in there were quite a few older cars, several A35s, A30s, that kind of thing. But there was an A35 van in there, and it was rotten. The floors were gone, the sills were shot. It wasn't going anywhere else other than to the crusher eventually. But when I had a bit of a look around, I noticed it still had the roof vent on the top, and I thought, ooh, I know where that would look good. That would look just perfect on the roof of my Spitfire. So I don't quite know where I got the tools from. Maybe I had a chisel in the back of the car, or I borrowed one from the scrapyard owner. I don't quite remember now. But basically I hacked a hole in the roof of this A35 van, which, I mean, it sounds like heresy now, but it was a completely scrap van that had been stacked in the corner of this scrapyard for decades, and it was completely shot to pieces, but it still had this on the roof. So this is what I retrieved off it, thinking, oh, I might fit that on the Spitfire. Now, as things came to pass, I actually did sell the Spitfire because I think I needed to raise the money to buy the Series 1 XJ12, which I've referred to in one of the previous videos in this little series that I'm doing for the Old Classic Car channel. And yeah, so the Spitfire had to go in order to get the Jaguar, so I never actually got around to fitting this on or cutting a hole, which I was always a little bit dubious about, cutting a hole in the middle of the factory hardtop that I had for the 2.5 Spitfire. But I hung on to this because I thought, you never know, I may get another car, another modified car, maybe another modified Spitfire one day, and I could carry out the plan of fitting this to the roof or the hardtop of it. So it's still hanging up in the garage, and I don't rule out using this again one day for some interesting little project like that. Maybe a slightly modified classic. I quite fancy doing something like that again, using period parts. I'm not into fitting modern electricery and things like that into classic cars, but I do quite like the idea of cars that have got period tuning mods and feature modifications that were commonly done when the cars were current, say back in the 1960s, something like that. So I don't rule out ever using this again, so I'm not selling it, but you never know, this may just appear on a car here at OCC HQ one day. Either me or maybe even the youthful assistant once he gets up and running with his own collection of old cars. But anyway, let's go and have a look at another item on the shelf just over the back there. Okie dokie, right, well, I've come into the shade because it's a beautiful sunny day and it's getting a bit warm over there. So the last item that I'm going to look at for this particular video is this, a very unusual shaped tub for Holt's rust remover. And yeah, well, I've never seen one of these before. If you've got one of these, let me know in the comments, because, you know, I mean, I don't actively go looking, but we get to quite a few shows and auto jumbles, and I've never seen a bottle of this before. Rids rust in minutes, leaves rust resistant, surface primed for paint, made in England. And this little tub, which is still full actually, that dates to 1952. And how do I know that dates to 1952, you ask? Well, many moons ago I visited a friend of mine over in Sheffield. Now, if you've been following the channel for a little while, you may remember a video I did revealing a friend of mine and a slightly rusty Jaguar XK120 that he'd recently imported from distant lands, and I helped him retrieve this thing and take it back to his house. You may have seen that video, you may not, but if you search for XK120 here on the Old Classic Car channel, you will find that video, and it's quite interesting. Now, I've known him for 35 years now, and way back in the 1990s he mentioned to me that one of his favourite local scrapyards just outside of Sheffield was in the process of being cleared. And this is always bad news, that's always going to set the alarm bells ringing. He told me there had been some fantastic old vehicles in there. Most of them are gone by the time I got to go over there with him, but there was still, around the periphery of this site, there were still some great things to look at. Cars overgrown, some of them you could barely even identify them anymore, they'd been sat there so long. I did manage to grab a few photographs, and I've got them in an album somewhere. And in one particular corner of this, what was a scrapyard that was being cleared out, there was this van. Now, I don't remember sadly what make of van it was, but it could only have been something from the 1940s, possibly even a little bit earlier than that. But we sort of managed to get inside this thing, and inside it there were boxes and boxes and boxes of motor related products. It was as if the delivery driver loaded up his van with all these products, these car-related products, and then just driven to the scrapyard and put the van in there and dumped it there and left it with all this stuff still in the back. Now, we could tell that it was sort of 1950s stuff because you only have to take one look at it and you can see that this dates to around about the 1950s. But fortunately, there was a little sheet in there. I think it was either a receipt or a packing document, and it listed many of the items that were in there. And it was dated to 1952, so that's how I know that some of the things that are in there, in particular quite a few tins of polish which I've got, which I still use from time to time on special occasions, they actually date to 1952. But I couldn't believe it when we clambered into the back of this rusty, decrepit, derelict old van. There were still all these boxes of old motor factor products like this in the back. I was just blown away. So I can't remember how much we paid the scrapyard owner. It probably wouldn't have been a huge amount, and we split it between us. So we retrieved everything, took it all back to his place, and then we just divvied it up between us, and he had half of it, I had about half of it as well, and many of those tins ended up in there. So again, like all the things I've spoken about in this particular video, nothing has any great value really. I mean, what's that worth? £5 maybe, something like that, just as a bit of a novelty to put on your shelf. But this is a reminder of that exciting trip over to Sheffield, over to Yorkshire, and going to have a look at this scrapyard in its final days before it was finally cleared and everything was gone for good. So this brings back happy memories of trawling around scrapyards, looking for junk, clambering through broken old cars and vans, lorries, that kind of thing. And yeah, that's why I still have this on the shelf, and indeed quite a few other little tins that are in there. There's a blast from the past all the way back to the early 1990s. Anyway, I think that's probably enough waffle from me for this particular video. I'll include links to the previous 2 videos that I've done at the end of this one, where I talk about some of the other worthless but to me still valuable items that I've hung on to for so many years. Like I say, probably 35 years I've owned this and hung on to it. I've never actually used it. I don't know if this rust remove actually works. It's probably a very similar formulation to the kind of things that you can buy today, because a lot of this stuff hasn't really changed a great deal. But I just think that's really cool, and I think it's such a neat little container. It's plastic, this is. It's not glass, but it's just a pretty groovy thing. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, especially if you like collecting this kind of thing yourself. And there'll be loads more videos along very soon. So bye for now.